All right, so up until this point, what we need to be able to do is we need to be able to move between fractions, decimals, and percentages. So we've done fractions and decimals a lot last year, and we'll touch on it again later this year, but percentages is kind of like the new thing, okay? So just remember that throughout all of this, percent really means per 100 or per cent. Cent means 100. So when we go, it's important that you read the question carefully first, and in the first instance, it's asking us to change these percentages into a fraction, okay? So remember that 16% just means 16 per 100, okay? And the other part of the question is that it's asking you to put it into simplest form. So you can just put this in your calculator, but what you're doing is you're just coming up with an equivalent fraction. So I can see that 4 will go into 16 4 times, and 4 will go into 125 times. So that in its simplest form is 4 over 25. To get the full marks, you'll have to go all the way to the simplest fraction. Second one's nice and easy, 11%. That's just 11%. Can't shrink that one any further. So that's as far as we'll be able to go. Next one. This one is 148%, which means you've got more than a whole, okay? Now this one is not really clear for us how we would simplify this one. So you might do this one as a multiple step one. I can see they're both even numbers. So what we might do is we might divide both of them by 2. So that one would be 76 over 50. And then I can see I've got 2 even numbers again, so I could shrink that one again. So I'd end up with 38 over 25. Oops, not 28, 25. And it also said that you could write them in there. Well, I'd probably keep it, to be honest, like that. You could make it a mixed number if you want, but I reckon that's about as far as I'd take that one down. Everyone happy with that one? All right, let's roll on. So this time what we're doing is we're taking fractions and we're moving them up to percentages. Now the trick with these is sometimes it's going to be easier to do that from fraction form. Sometimes it's going to be easier to do that from decimal form. So if you end up with something like that first one, which is a really nice sort of, got a nice denominator, and the denominator is the 25, okay? If you can easily turn that denominator into a 100, then that's the key to this. So by making that 4 times bigger, I would make that 100. But just remember with fractions, when you're building equivalent fractions, anything you do to the bottom of a fraction, you have to do to the top as well, okay? So that means I'd have to make the top 4 times bigger as well. Because if I make this an equivalent fraction where I've now got 7 times 4, which makes 28 over 100, that is the same as 28%, okay? So if you can turn the denominator into 100, you know you've just turned it into a percentage, and you just have to write it a different way. That second one though, if you try and put that into a fraction form before you move it over to over 100, so wherever we're up to then, what we're going to do this time is we're going to move this one into a decimal. Now you can do it with a calculator, 8 1/4, you can put that into your calculator, you just have to push the fraction button twice. But if you recognise a quarter, which most of you should, and change that into a decimal, what this really is this is 8.25. And all right, next one's really easy. When you see these numbers like this, you just write them straight in as a percentage, okay? Teach your brain to just move between decimals and percentages. This is how you do your maths when you're in the shops, okay? So in your calculator, you're using decimals instead of percentages. When we go the other way, we're literally just moving the decimal place the other way, 2 to the right. So we're looking at 45% in this case. All right, next one, we've got 0.09, same deal, moving your decimal 2 to the right, you've got 9%. All right, so the first time we tried to do B, we got it wrong, and by we I mean me. Now have a look at this, and this will understand why your percentages are either really big numbers or they're really small numbers, okay? In the first one, did you notice how we've got 7/25ths? We don't have the whole amount, so we're going to have less than 100. And when we look at that, we do. We've got 28%. But in the second question, what we've got is we've got 8 wholes, which means automatically we're up to 800%, okay? And we've got another quarter. So if we move this to decimal, not as a percentage, we've got 8.25. That means that I've got all 8 plus another quarter, okay? So that means that I've got 8 lots of 100% and another 25%. So it's the same deal. The decimal's moving 2 to the right. So we've got 825%. So it's important that we're moving in the right direction. So maybe what we should make ourselves a note for here is when you're moving 2 percentages, you're making things 100 times bigger. When you're moving away from percentages, you're making them 100 times smaller. So you might make yourself a little note there. All right, question 3. This time what we're doing is we're going from percentages to decimals, which means that we're obviously dividing by 100 as we've just decided. So when we do these ones, what you're going to be doing is you're going to be moving the decimal 2 places to the left, okay? So instead of 122%, you're going to have 1.22, okay? So it has moved 2 positions. It's moved 2 positions, by the way, because 100 has 2 zeros in it, okay? So you have to be super careful when you get to these 8%ers and stuff like that, because when you move 2 decimals, leave a gap and fill it in with zeros. So this one is 0.08. They're bound to ask you questions about this because people will put 0.8 and that's wrong. That's 80%. All right, I'm going to skip to the last one first because the third one's actually the hardest in this list. If I've got 1.5, you should know that a half is 0.5, okay? So in this one, I've got 1.5. But when I go back, 8/40ths is really hard to convert to a decimal. You guys might be able to do that because you've got a calculator. But if you haven't got a calculator, what you might need to do is you might need to simplify this fraction first, which is going to be 7 2/5, or 1/5, sorry, because 8 will go into 8 once and it will go into 45 times. And 1/5 is 0.2, okay? So this is actually the same as 7.2. Who knows that 1/5 is 0.2? This is a really good one to learn, okay, because that's also 20%, okay? So remember that like one day of school is 20% of each school week, okay? So, and then if you think about that, I always think about every day we do is 2% towards our next holiday because our terms are 10 weeks long. So every day represents 2% of the of the term. So if we're in week 8 and we're in day 2 of it, you know, by the end of this, we're going to be a long way through this term. We'll be 84% of the way through this term at the end of today, okay? Which is a good way of thinking about our holidays. Are we in week 8? Yes, we are. Yeah. What's that? Oh, actually, we're 74 because we haven't finished the 8th week yet. All right. Question 4, we're nearly done. You ready? So let's do 3 more and make sure that we've got all this down pat and keep the video nice and short for later. We just learnt that a fifth is 0.2. So we know that this is the same as 4.2%. And then we also know that if we need to switch it out to a decimal, then what we're going to need to do is move our decimal 2 places to the left. Remember, we divide by 100 if we're going from percentages. So this way we're looking at 0.042. Doesn't matter how many decimals. Don't drop decimals. Don't round. Don't do anything crazy. Just write them in, okay, as you see them. Just keep whacking zeros in front of them and just keep bouncing that decimal place. So next one, 4.8, we're going to keep moving. So decimal moves 2 to the left, okay? We're looking at 0.048. And then the last one is going to be messy, okay? You're going to have to really watch your zeros here. We've got to go 2 to the left still. So what we're looking at is an additional 2 zeros on this. So count them up. You've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 now. So it's 0.1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and that's now your decimal.